there is very little sort of interest amongst young people to read history. It's generally a kind of a thing that is so sort of put to one side. Do you think that there is an interesting way in which we can use something like your piece of work to set a trend for people to understand history a lot more? Like when we were growing up, we used to read, like, our history was from things like Amar Chitra Kathas and, basically comics, right? I don't think, hand on heart, I've sat down and picked a book on a history related to Bharat. And I've never read it sort of from cover to cover. It's just not. It's somehow not come across. Is there an opportunity here to bring it out so that it becomes engaging for younger people as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the whole idea. It wasn't meant for younger people per se, but what I've observed over the years is history is treated as a stepchild. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's almost like it's to be forgotten because it happened a long time back, right? Whereas it isn't like that, because we are here because of history. Certain things happen certain way, and history always repeats itself. There are patterns. The whole idea was to write this was so that I use this term very carefully. Common people would feel interested in reading it. And the second chapter in the book is actually describing how battles happen. So what is an artillery and what does cavalry mean? And what happens when you siege something? The common terms. So it describes it in that very simple terms, that this is how it is, because then the battles follow, so people would know what a garrison means and all that. It has to be told as stories because stories are what they are. And if you tell them as stories and make those characters interesting, because it's about people. So Siraj was extremely insecure, and so he just ran off, and stuff like that. That's what will make it interesting. The other thing is history becomes hostage to ideological battles and camps. So it's saffron history versus green history or whatever. The whole idea is to keep it neutral with a slight bit of color, but so that when the person is reading it, he or she doesn't think that they're being fed propaganda. It's just about going through it and making it very analytical. You judge for yourself. Here are the points. Here's what I think, but you judge, right? If those two things are mixed, I think it will become interesting. Obviously, in this day and age of OTT platforms and stuff, a movie will always score over a book, yes, but stuff like this, right? Unexplored facets of history, something like this would probably interest people more. And yes, I think this is required more and more because history always repeats itself. I mean, if one reads the partition history of India that started from the Khilaf moment, you see a lot of parallels happen. It's absolutely required.
There's a quote by Orwell where he says, those who control the present control the past, and those who control the past control the future.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said about, like, it's time that we're able to own the past, like the way that, and I'm not saying being one-sided, but I suppose, there are different ways of telling a story from different perspectives. And, I think you were mentioning one day that, the education system, the British really desecrated our education system such that we've become a self-forgetful people. And I suppose, regardless of the content of your book, I think there is a real opportunity here to pioneer a generation of people who are just really fascinated by history. And yeah, I think just on the consumer end, if you yourself can make that kind of proactive, because the content seems fine, it seems like you're well researched, but now is that part where that proactive approach to let's try and get hold of every historian in a UK university who studies India, or a military historian from every university, or key universities in India who are looking at this. Like, I think let's start making those connections from now.